And so I do know that we did resolve the sexual harassment language in PESPA, and Nellie showed me the language, gave me a copy of the language. She said this is the language that was settled on. So I think that'll work. That language works just as well for our contract.
Okay, so we don't have any objection to adding that same language. We'll just add that in.
Language will be added in this language.
So the language in Article 12.
That's our, yeah, it's
Article 12.
And then we were just adding in the sexual harassment language as a separate, it will be a separate letter.
And then we have also added in.
And we added then F, which I think is something you had suggested in I. Your pages aren't numbered, but it's on the last one in Article 12.
Your I, you had suggested.
Yeah, I guess I'm just flipping back and forth between ours and.
That's why I have yours up here in mine.
So you referenced a portion of the statute, and we just quoted the entirety of the statute, 100332.
Hey.
You don't have that? Of what
Oh,
of our section?
oh yeah, but you didn't, okay. Oh, you didn't put, I thought you had said you put 1003.
No,
I
that's
didn't-
just,
okay.
they
yeah,
have it down here, but it was only part of the statute.
Got it.
Right.
So, good with that.
And the other things that we had looked at were that so the acts that we had asked for about the teacher being assaulted or battered while acting within the scope of the employment and pursuant to board policy, the board shall give full support to such employee in dealing with the appropriate authorities if charges are pursued. That was
So-
something we had asked, we added.
Yeah, and we don't, one, I'm not even clear what that means, but we rejected that.
The concept in this, and I apologize for the unclear language, was that the district will represent their agents, which are their employees, if there are any charges that apply, especially if they are asked to, if they're in a situation where they have to file charges against the student or assault that.
They're going to represent the teacher. If the teacher wants to, or the employee wants to charge the student, there's going to be representation of the employee.
As an agent of the school, the employee is working for you. If they are attacked while they're working for you, and they choose to file charges, they should have the support of the people that they work for. They were assaulted at work.
And just, I mean, I think I know, but again, we're the support, full support. What does that mean? I mean, I think all of us sitting here would probably define it a little differently, but that's where we get the vagueness of.
Well, I mean, the wording to be cleared up, that's not a problem. What we would like to make sure, what we'd like to be sure is that our members and our educators, non-members, potential members who are out there, if something happens to them in the classroom, they get assaulted, that they have the protection, they have the coverage or the support of the district in whatever they choose to do, as opposed to being told by, say, an SRO, you're not going to file a report or anything like that. Because I've specifically dealt with 2 instances with people who have resigned because they got no satisfaction whatsoever dealing with a student that assaulted. it's a problem. I mean, there was an article in NPR this weekend about behavior of students across the country as ramping up and escalating. I think that if we're going to show our teachers that we care, we need to support them if they need that pain, or if they have that pain going on in their life. That's all.
So why don't you take back your language and tighten it up, so right now it's so broad, I can think of 15 different reasons why that's not acceptable. So
What are some of the reasons?
well, a student goes like that to a teacher, and the teacher wants to charge the student with assault and battery. SRO, school staff disagrees, it is assault for a battery. What do you mean we're going to support you fully in charging a student that we don't want? Huh? Right, so an unlawful touching that we don't believe should criminalize the student, you want us to give full support, and we're not even sure what that means to the teacher. A technical assault and battery is exactly what I did to Jody. And so if a teacher wants charged, she's gonna hit me too, I can see it. If the teacher wants the student to be charged, we may not agree with that. Law enforcement may not agree that it meets the standard. So I'm not sure what you mean by we are
Well,
going to.
in this is honestly, and I tend to draw a line as a way to inspire. But one teacher that we both are aware of, she was a behavior specialist, she got assaulted at school. And there was virtually nothing done despite the fact that she filed the protection.
What was the nature of this?
The nature of the assault was the student was, I think he was not classified as a behavior problem, but he was on that, in that process. And he gets acting out, assaulted her, and actually sent her to the hospital with a messed up wrist. I don't get into a lot of details, but she got a problem with her wrist and a couple other things, and she just got hit in the head a couple of times. But the problem is the SRO made the statement, we're not going to write a report on this, because I'm not writing a report on a kid who got autism.
Okay.
That was his phrase. And at that point, I mean, she was assaulted.
Yeah,
To the point where
that's
she
why I
felt like
wanted
she
to know
had to
exactly
leave.
what it was. It doesn't.
So what does full support in convincing a St. Petersburg law enforcement officer mean to you? Whatever officer, the way this is written, it could be anybody. So let's say it's an outside agency decides that there will not be charges. What would you suggest this means for the school board?
If the issue, I mean, obviously, that's what I'm going to talk to you. Obviously, that's not good. We don't necessarily always get into the weeds with a lot of prescriptive, sorry, I lost my word for a second there, but we don't need to describe all of these different instances. I mean, it can be a case by case basis. But like I said, I'll clean the language up and get it back.
We'll see if it's something we can work
Yeah,
with.
the counter example, I mean, many of those counter examples don't go any further than the phones in our office. When people call us and they explain the situation on the very, very, very rare occasion that I've had someone bring a case of assault or battery to me, or alleging assault or battery, when we understand the facts, figure out that really this is probably more an accidental touching or something so inconsequential that it does not put someone reaching in fear of their safety, then we can talk our people through that. And even if they chose to bring those charges or chose to pursue charges with an outside agency, we're not saying that the district necessarily has to convince St. PPD that no, this is in fact assault or battery. We're not asking anyone to consider facts. What is happening, happens with more frequency though, is that our teachers and our other personnel who are legitimately assaulted, threatened, attacked, battered, and that happens with much more frequency than the counter example, try to get help. And almost never is that on the first time. Unless the incident rises to such a level as to be exceptional in its nature, most often it's a repeat. It's a pattern of behavior with a particular student. But when they reach out for help, what they're running into is brick walls and actual district personnel, SROs. They're saying, we are not going to write that report. Now, they're not the ones that they're not judge and jury. They're simply, in fact, that wouldn't even apply in the case involving a juvenile. But refusal to write a report, refusal to process any kind of disciplinary action because the idea is that they're not going to have, that this child won't face any kind of consequences because of particular exceptionalities. That is not only a misreading of federal law, but it's also a misrepresentation of the contract when the employer has a duty, and even under state statute, to keep the employees safe, to reasonably act to keep the employees safe. So based on not the counterexample, but like I said, there are some unreasonable counterexamples, but the vast majority of what we're dealing with are people that have been battered more than once, that have faced this more than once, maybe even have more than one physically threatened situation in the classroom, and they need help to make that stop, to keep their safety. It's inexcusable that a district employee could end up in the hospital and still not get any support from either the site administration or district administration. Those are the examples that prove this.
Right. So, I mean, maybe it could be connected in some way to D that we already have, where it is indicated that if a pupil is found guilty of assaulting or battering a teacher and no teacher negligence is proven, any damages, injuries, or material loss suffered will be fairly compensated for by the board. And I would imagine those instances would definitely fall under that they should be, you know, that is assault. If they're paying for the injury, the damages or injuries, I would
So
imagine
that
a big-
falls under workers' comp, and so that's a different scenario than what I'm hearing described. And in F, all I'm asking you to do is we get the problem. There's some kids that beat up on staff members, but I don't understand exactly what role you want the board to play in that. So if you can take a crack at coming back with it, that'd be great.
Okay.
I'll tell you, and not that this was included here, but I do think it's pertinent to the discussion. In D, the idea of no teacher negligence is proven. I think that's problematic because it gives an incentive, could potentially give an incentive to look for even irrelevant negligence in a situation. We can always point to, in any situation, we can always point to. In fact, the entire evaluation system is based on that. Even in a case of stellar teaching, there's always something we can point to and say, hey, this could have been even better. In a situation where somebody has been assaulted or battered, but they're being compensated or they're being or protected under workers' comp, I know that wouldn't apply to material loss, but they're being cared for in that situation is hinged on them having behaved entirely perfectly in every situation that was within their control, being absolutely pristine, is unrealistic, and it's just not what is going to happen in the best of scenarios, in the best of classrooms. So I think that as long as we have a provision there that makes it, on its face makes it nearly impossible for an employee to fall under this definition, then further language is necessary to make sure that they have every protection possible for them by the district.
So take a stab at it and. Yeah, okay.
So I think that was the only thing that was up for discussion in 12. Yeah.
12H really restates. It does, but it also kind of codifies statutory language, so I'm not sure that.
Yeah, that's right.
Argument, it's related to statute, okay.
Yeah.
And
What are we?
Same.
I see that you all clarified, like you said, that you clarified, your F and our I was more or less on the same.
Right.
Yep.
So this, that would be. All right, then. Okay, Article 13, student discipline. Correct, we were saying following piece that, and in A, we had added that they follow the PCSB policy and process for discipline referrals in J through M. And those were some options there. There were some options. Because what we're finding, a problem across the schools is there's like some schools are making up their own forms. They're just creating new forms and to reduce the number of referrals. And there are some schools that just use the district's approved referral form, which I believe everybody should be using. They should be creating their own referral forms with their own rules. And there are some schools that make up completely different forms that aren't even referrals. And that's not a legitimate way to reduce discipline referrals. That's not legitimate. That's hiding them under a different form, which I do think whatever we do, whatever decisions are made for student discipline reporting, it needs to be uniform. It needs to be.
So I'm going to take us back several meetings ago, because I know I just definitely was shared at the last time. And I believe we had some further conversation about that. And we talked about how, I remember, I think I was me specifically saying it, that it is, we keep hearing autonomy at the school and at the school level, and one school, one high school might look very different than an elementary school. And so I think that is why, I think we were all talking about this, that there might be different forms used because of that. And what we had added on G was that school personnel will follow the school-wide behavior plan, because I think what we were hearing, I remember this conversation now, it's coming back, is that I think certain members here were also frustrated with teachers at your school not following what was expected. And I said, well, that should be the expectation. And so that's why we added that language there, that school personnel will follow the school-wide behavior plan. And so again, I understand there's probably more to it than that, but that was, I remember that as the conversation going on. So am I on the same page? Does anybody else remember that conversation?
That initially, when we initially first started talking about the argument back in July.
Yeah.
So,
And the other thing we talked about in July, and I'm just going to pick on somebody, Nick, I'll just use you as an example. So let's say Nick does not enforce the cell phone policy. Does that mean that Nick should be disciplined because he does not? That's what this is adding. A teacher must enforce cell phone policy. So we had that discussion as well. I mean, each school develops their own school-wide behavior plan, and teachers at that school should be following it. We didn't think it was appropriate to put this in the contract that is essentially adding a requirement that could result in penalizing staff members for treating those policies differently.
No, I hear what you're saying, but I think the school-wide behavior plan is one thing, but the form of reporting a discipline issue should be consistent. That's the piece that I think is different, even if, oh, good Lord.
Quick question about, she's doing that, just for my own knowledge. Sure. In your, and I I'm glad we're talking about this because I made a note. In your proposal under 13G, school personnel will follow the school-wide behavior plan. How is that voted on at the site? The behavior plan, is that part of a vote at the site?
We've got teachers sitting right here. We have I know schools have behavior teams or school-based leadership teams.
Nope. We occasionally can have, like, so we have something similar to that, but generally it's just sort of handed down.
Now, I believe there are some people working on it, and again, schools might just
but I mean,
continue it from the year before, right? And so, but correct.
Yeah, but I mean, that's very.
PBIS, I know schools have PBIS teams.
Right, typically schools have a discipline committee, right, that that is composed of teachers and administrators, and then that
Never had
merges with a PBIS or positive behavior piece, right? That identifies the things that we're gonna do to incentivize good behavior. Those things are typically merged together in the school-wide behavior plan. The other piece that I think is important to remember is that the student code of conduct defines behavior students will exhibit, right? And specifies the consequences for those behaviors. If you're just referring to a form that schools will do, what I find high schools doing is they're adding pieces that are pre-disciplinary referral, like if you get, if somebody, disrespects a teacher right in that moment, do you write a behavior, a referral for that disrespect that first time, or do you counsel the student, make a phone call home? Those are the things I'm finding. But as far as what a behavior is classified as, it's in the code of conduct. There's no discrepancy between schools, what you find to be this behavior or that behavior.
And do you generally find that when edified in the code of conduct, the consequences for particular behaviors, do you find, and this is something people do you find that those are enforced relatively unified, in a unified manner from site to site?
Absolutely not.
No.
Absolutely not.
I don't know.
So
That's a good question.
I will speak to that real quick. Because I've had to deal with a couple of teachers this week for that. So perhaps my school is a bad example for this because of our extreme amount of vacancies that we have. But so we haven't had an ABC teacher in like 3 years. And so what I find is that because we don't have a lot of individual steps. So the teacher I was dealing with, so they have ABCs in the grade level offices. So I was dealing with a counselor who, on top of her own job, also has to watch ABC kids. And this is universal throughout and she was feeling some sort of frustration about this. At least at my school, if there's an RTL team and there are steps. We were formerly like part of the TZ schools. And there's at least at my school, there's a massive breakdown. If a kid just refuses to do stuff, like the kid can just do what he wants. And I promise you, I'm not using like hyperbola here. If a kid truly wants to do what they want, they can do what they want at that school until it gets to a point where it's like, trying to throw another kid over a side rail. That happened last year, not this year, but until it hits that point. Or we had a student who sexually assaulted 2 other students and he was in school the next couple of days. Like, and I don't see all the ins and outs in this. I'm not in the loop of all this stuff. I am definitely not administration. But
it does give rise, I think, to the request that there be some sort of universal reporting. So if there is this idea that it's not necessarily being enforced uniformly across the district, one of the things that we can do is make sure that it is reported uniformly across the district, particularly when the district is complying with reporting requirements from state and federal reporting requirements on discipline issues and disparities in discipline issues. It's critical that we have a uniform reporting system across the district. I totally get the argument for school autonomy because we care very deeply about classroom autonomy. But I think that autonomy only really functions well if it is truly democratic and there's input. So if we know that the behavior and the student behavior system at any given site is not subject to approval by the faculty, the ones that are going to be walking down on a daily basis, and I don't know if we can necessarily say that's autonomous.
I think what Nick described isn't the definition of autonomy at all. I think what he's describing is that a lack of following the student code of conduct in the school-wide behavior plan. And I'm trying to remember the meeting that we had Dr. Hines at, Lori and Paul, I can't remember, but I know Dr. Hines is one of our area superintendents. And actually this issue did come up in his presence. And I remember clearly the first thing he said was, if a teacher is concerned and has taken the concern to the principal, et cetera, done the things that teachers do when they're concerned about something that isn't happening at their school, right? If you're not getting satisfaction or clarification as to why something was handled or wasn't handled, then the area superintendent, that is their job to make sure that the school is following the student code of conduct, all of those processes, using their school-wide behavior plan. That is one of their roles.
So you're saying my teacher should contact the area superintendent?
Go through the process of talking to the principal, right, about what's not going well, et cetera. But yes, Dr. Hines literally said they need to know. They need to know when something isn't happening at the school that should be happening.
So I think one of the things, if we had some sort of universal, I mean, yeah, so you have progressive disciplinary models and schools can sort of set that for whatever they need to do. But when it comes down to it, the area superintendent, or, there should be a fairly universal, this is what's going on in our school form, that even a teacher can be like, or I as a lead, a rep at the school can make sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, because
That's why we put in that the school personnel will follow the school-wide behavior plan.
And if they're not,
They're not.
Okay, but I'm just saying that the first step of any discipline process is reporting the issue. And some of these different forms that are being created do not allow the issue to be properly reported. So we're not even getting into what is the consequence going to be, or will there be a consequence. The reporting is being hidden or not happening because it's being labeled under different forms. So you can't even start the process. There are no teachers who want to over-discipline a child. That is not why people go into teaching. But as a teacher, I know that the idea of facing a consequence of some kind for bad behavior is the best thing for the child. It is the best thing for the child. And that is why teachers want to be sure, because bad behavior escalates. And it's much better to catch it early when it's small things that are worrisome, and to have an appropriate consequence for that. Because when that happens, if nothing is being reported at the lower level, and only wait until it has escalated already to approaching a dangerous level, that is not only dangerous for the people who work there, who definitely we represent, but it is not good for the child. In watching, I think it was last night, I don't know, it was one night watching college students overturning vehicles and setting things on fire to celebrate the win of a football game. It brings to me these kids, they're in college, they were never told at a lower level, this behavior is bad. And it's like, and then they get to the point where now they're open to criminal. And no one here wants to criminalize children. Nobody wants that. But we want them to learn so that they do not become those crazy people who set things on fire because they think that's appropriate for celebration, because now they are open to criminalization and they are possibly of age and they can be severely punished. They'd much rather have a lower consequence. So what we're saying is that we just need a way to uniformly report behaviors, no matter what they are. Because there are schools that differentiate and say, well, that behavior goes in this form and this behavior goes up. No, it needs to be universal so that we can make sure that a child's bad behavior does not escalate.
Can I also ask, and this is something that I wasn't familiar with before coming to Dallas. Correct me, please. I could be wrong about this, but my understanding is that there are at least two different reporting systems. So if a principal or a teacher wants to issue a referral, don't correct, that they are to write the referral and submit that to administration. But that doesn't, that itself isn't entered into any kind of district-wide reporting system itself. It's sort of a ticket that goes to administration, and administration reports the referral or the incident, and that becomes electronically reported. But then if I were as a teacher to write a referral, my experience, in the prior previously was that if I wrote a referral, it went directly into, I forget what we called it at that time, something like behavior tracker, and connect something. And that was in the student record. I had direct, if I wrote a referral, it went directly into the student record, and then administration would go in and note what consequences took place, and so forth. But it was part of a district-wide reporting system that I had direct access to as a teacher. My understanding is that's not the way it happens here. Is that right?
That's correct.
As an elementary teacher, I cannot go in and there is not anything on a screen or report that I can pull that will let me know other than the parent contact log.
That's a rule that you can't directly get it into the focus system.
Yeah, and the-
Depends on where you are, if there are multiple sites that have two different behavioral referral databases. One is Focus, which has referrals that parents can see, which would include assessor referrals. Okay, those are the ones. And then there's another database that schools use for the lower incidence behaviors. I believe what they're asking for is that all referrals that are written by teachers be able to be reviewed by the parents, who should have that information, and also be able to be tracked by the county. So they are on one system across the board. We call it Focus. So not use two different systems in schools.
What is the second thing
Yeah,
you?
what's it
you-
called?
Be a database.
No, but you are referring to some schools have two
Two
systems.
separate ones. One
And what is
separate-
one?
It doesn't have a name. That's the issue. The issue is it's not going to Focus.
Is it like a Google Doc or something like
They
that?
rarely use Google, but usually they use another Excel. They call it different things. However you want to name it, a behavior referral reporting system. Usually the social worker, behavior specialists have access to that. And the lower level business next sort of referral will go into those. Where the larger things will go into the Focus.
So do you have that at your school?
Yes,
So I could call and ask about it.
absolutely. I actually want to figure out today, show you.
Well, that's what I was asking. Where is it?
Yeah.
You said you didn't know. So,
But it sounds like that might be what's happening at your school, but then another school might use a different way of
Well, these
documenting
are
it.
names where the referrals are broken down, so the more severe referrals can show up in Focus.
And across,
All the referrals are not being done in Focus.
but across the board, teachers can't access Focus.
Teachers cannot access Focus to see a
Yeah,
referral.
that's not
You can see
acceptable.
that one, you right.
Yeah, and we've had teachers asking, where can I see that process referral? And our administrator saying, go look at Focus, and yet I had to go down there and say, I spent a whole lot of time trying to find a place in Focus where we could see it, and it's not in there. So there are some administrators that may not even realize that it wasn't in Focus, because ours, she was new, and she didn't know that teachers didn't have access to it in Focus. So unless they're handing us back the referral, and honestly, even if they are handing us back the referral, we're not still seeing that it's in Focus. So we don't 100% know that it's been.
so this is beyond our scope. The area superintendents do house that, that information. And I kind of noted this, that area superintendent, I would like to, maybe if this is our conversation, we can get a feedback from them or have one of them come in and provide some explanation and just information for you regarding that. So again, I'm not going to sit here and say things that I'm not knowledgeable about. So, if we mark that and then we could
Right,
revisit
you
that.
know across the board that teachers can't access Focus, and then Focus is the only place where parents can see the discipline. Because, and as a parent, I mean, I'm not a parent, but as a parent, I would get upset about that as well, because.
Okay, let's
I'm only
get the
being-
information and let's have somebody explain the process
Right,
and
we
the
need to make
information.
sure that there's a uniform process for reporting is really, as far as behavior wide, what
So what I want to make
consequences
sure,
are.
right, and I want to make sure that like we need to get the people at the table that can answer that. So now that I know that these are the questions, I can have them come and provide that, because again, if there is something that is to be used and it is not being used appropriately and so forth, that's what we have to address. It doesn't mean, that it's not, that we don't have it. We could very well have it, but it's the implementation of it. So let me look at that and get somebody here that can kind of maybe walk us through that, if that would work.
And the fact that it's the PCSB policy, right? When you're saying following the PCSB policy, when you're saying follow the school-wide plan, we need somewhere where the code of conduct is respected as well.
It is.
It's in this part of it.
When you stepped off, she said,
Yeah.
that's supposed to come first, correct? Yes, that's important to me,
Huge.
and that's honestly, that's the breakdown.
That's the comment I wanted to make, is that's the issue, because I understand, each school has their own behavior plan.
Right.
And that's under the area superintendent. But the issue is that the student code of conduct is not being followed everywhere. And what happens is you get this breakdown where even if teachers are following the process, sometimes administrators are not following the process. That sends mixed messages to the kids, it sends mixed messages to the teachers. And just a very quick example. I had several students in in-school suspension for 5 days. They got that from an administrator at lunch for what I would call minor disrespect. 5 days in school suspension. But I have a student that throws something at another student, which I see as something that is dangerous. And as if I was a parent, I would be very upset about that. And a referral for that gets rejected. So that's just a very clear example of student code of conduct not being followed at the site level. And I'm not saying that's every school, but that's a common thing. And I think we're all aware of that. And I think it's something that sometimes, you're right, we need to bring other people into the conversation to find a way to resolve that.
So quick additional comment to that. And the code of conduct is being interpreted differently by different places.
And I will tell you, anything going down, it doesn't even have to be to do with discipline, any piece of information, I could probably walk into every single one of your classrooms and it'll be interpreted slightly different. So I want to be, I hear what you're saying. I get it, but even when I presented as a principal something, and I was very clear, and I'd walk into my classroom and I'm like, oh, you're interpreting it like that? Okay, it's working for you or whatever, but so that's the fine line you're walking, here a little bit. And I think it's important to say, because I don't think anybody around here wants to be told exactly, to interpret things, again, we provide the information, but I hear what you're saying, and we listen, we understand. I get we understand what you're saying. It is how detailed, because again, when it goes in, and don't forget, following the code of conduct goes across the board. And I have teachers who don't follow, just like you say, administrators don't follow. I have teachers that also interpret it differently, and it's okay. It works in their classroom, right? But if we're going to go, I don't want to go down where it's going to be so prescribed, and then we're going to have another issue with, well, it works for me, I don't need to, do that. So again, we absolutely hear the scenarios, we hear the situation, and so, I do hear what you're saying, absolutely.
Right, so the reporting and the main reason, one of the main reasons, it's not the only reason, the code of conduct has to be part of it, is the, what we had put in about the student code of conduct regarding cell phones.
Yep.
Not necessarily the use of cell phones in the classroom, because a lot of schools make up their own rules about that, and they allow the teachers, they use autonomy for that, and they allow teachers autonomy to use the cell phones for educational purposes. Correct. But the students are subject to applicable PCSB policies regarding the illegal reporting of activities in the classroom. That's the important part, which was just firmed up this year in the code of conduct, that kids cannot illegally report activities in the classroom.
So that was firmed up in the student code of conduct.
That's why it's important that the code of
This
conduct.
is a teacher's contract.
This is the article for students' discipline.
Right.
So where you have that they will follow the school-wide behavior plan and the district code of conduct. So that once you add that sentence, that just that part, then everything in the code of conduct.
So we're gonna put, you're wanting me to add, and the students will follow the code of conduct?
No.
I didn't hear you say
School
that.
personnel, this was your.
I got it,
line.
school personnel will follow the school-wide behavior plan.
And the code, and the district code of conduct. That means everybody is held to that code of conduct, because that code of conduct did allow for autonomy in use of stuff. It did. We made sure that it did. So I was on that bid, I remember doing that.
Okay. I'm
That's
putting in
why
that you're
it's-
requesting that,
That's
so
one of the
we'll,
main reasons it needs to be said, as well as, that was the main reason.
okay, I'm gonna put that down that you're requesting that to be added.
Yes, just adding, and, and the district code of conduct. Is followed.
G refers to standards, but not necessarily the code. So if
Sorry?
parties are agreeing to it, then want to make sure, but I do think that probably that if we're gonna codify also a school-wide behavior plan that could apparently vary so widely from site to site, it should at least be subject to a faculty vote.
Yeah.
So do you want to put together counter language, because this is ours, so we'll let you counter it back?
Something about that.
We can do that, and thank you for offering to bring in one of our area superintendents or.
And you know what, maybe it's better just to wait and let's have a conversation with the area superintendent first, and then.
So, yeah, we understand all the comments you're making, and just because we're making notes and getting some feedback doesn't necessarily mean we're agreeing to it. I just want to be clear on that.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I know. No, but I also appreciate your, like, before, in the previous section where you said we recognize that this is an issue in classrooms, like, that affirmation is important. It doesn't necessarily, we can have discussions about how to approach it, but it's important that people hear, that the district hears them and recognizes what's going on. It
Yeah.
doesn't discount their lived experiences. That's really important for them to hear, so I appreciate you saying that.
Sure.
Or 14 professional development. Now, this is where we started in July. It was the very first,
Yes, yeah.
was the discussion about the trade case. What-
Yeah.
But on D, in Article 14D, we have added, that educators shall be provided professional training learning aligned with professional standards for new developments of instructional delivery or pedagogy. And then district-wide trainings will be offered in breakouts determined by years of service. And that was just rejected, so I was just curious which part will, and why would that be rejected? So that it would be more I would think that more specialized training is better. Like, why would someone want to take the same training
well,
over and over again?
Again, I don't know, why that would be, but, again, I'm gonna go back to, it's not something that can't be presented to teaching and learning, as Rita is representative. Thank goodness we have a representative here. But to put it into a contract that all will be offered is, we're not gonna put something in it that we just, feasibility. It's a good idea to think about and to expand and to look into. We're just not prepared to just make district-wide trainings solely offered by years of service. There may be something out there, and I know we always say, oh, well, that's okay, and it's applicable, but when we put it in contract, then we have to follow, like, and so forth. So it's, oh, sure.
So I think that we'd be making a mistake to equate years of service with skill sets that are necessary and applicable in any situation a teacher finds themselves in regarding a specific teaching assignment that could change over the years of service. So to just use that, I think would be a disservice to teachers tremendously, because you can't say, well, you no longer need this type of PD because you've got X number of years of services. It really should be tailored to the practice and skill set of the teacher, the current assignment that the teacher has chosen to become involved in, right? And the PD that's available. Can we work harder at differentiating professional development for teachers who've had it, 1 or 2 years, but would like to attend it again, but perhaps in a more rigorous content or in a different application? Absolutely. And we'll do that. But just to make that simple.
And I think Ginger, I think were the one who was talking about that. I remember it coming, remembering that, I think you've been in your position for.
I have 2 hats. I wear admin and library.
Right.
Okay, so like the.
Literally have the same training.
So again, and I think what I said back when we talked about it earlier is that that's definitely like the library media specialist, like that should be conversation in the library media specialist. For me to dictate though, to somebody who's been a library media specialist for 20 years, to be broken away from somebody who's been a second year, maybe library media has some good training that they're going to have the veteran and the newbie working together. I don't know. I'm just thinking, because I'm not going to sit here and do that. But I also want to relate back to letter A in here. We do have, and I know you all, I think Lindsay and Nancy, I think we recently had a PD advisory committee meeting. Quote me if I think that was what the meeting was going on a couple weeks ago. But that is exactly, I'm hoping that I don't sit on that every time, that the advisory committee has that's where that can be brought up and discussed. I think it's, read it. I don't think there's any, we agree with looking at differentiating and moving towards that, but to put it in a contract, and I'm going to use this as an example for my elementary folks in here, you've been teaching, say, 2nd grade for 10 years, and now you've moved to 5th grade. Well, that's a new grade level, right? And so to differentiate, now you're a 5th grade teacher with 10 years experience, I think you're probably thinking, maybe I want to have some differentiated and some other, for me to say that you're not going to be in that, you're going to be in the 10-year group for 5th grade. You're probably going to go, really? This is my 1st year. And again, I'm not talking to the people who teach one subject matter the whole.
But aren't they're offered as options?
There are many options
Right, in
when,
the TWT, they're all options.
right.
What I think Andrew was talking
You have
about.
district-wide
situation, and also for me, every 20 years of going to the ELA one, if after the first 5 years or so, or 6 years, the options were all the same.
Yeah.
I mean, always, and that's ELA. I mean, the only difference would be, like, if there was something brand new that came along, like then we had a Marzano training, and Marzano was brand new.
Or the best standard.
Or now the best standards,
Right.
and that would be something new. Those would be the only things so to me, it was like, I have nothing to choose from here. I mean, unless I go through the same stuff over and over again.
So
And there
so,
needs to be
yeah.
some things that are for more, people who've been around for a while, so that they have some new options.
Sure.
To
Yep.
develop, to continue to develop.
I think, again, we're saying yes, but I think the route to do this is through the advisory committee. That's the purpose of the professional development advisory committee. So again, the reason, if you're asking for a reason why it was rejected, that is the reason why it was rejected.
How do you get on the advisory?
You are represented for PCTA on there, and there's teaching and learning. There is, it is not a group of 30 people. I don't believe it's that large, but I did not go to the last meeting, so I don't know how many people were.
There weren't a
in
lot of people,
attendance.
there was just, and Lindsay and I were there, Kevin was there.
Teaching and learning.
And can I tell you that Kevin has brought back to teaching and learning to all 3 levels exactly what that committee is looking for us to do, which is exactly what we've been talking about. So that is working, and I think you'll start seeing some of that more explicit and more clearly.
Okay.
Okay.
So now we're back to the trade days.
Okay.
Let's just get the that one.
Okay.
Trade days usually goes back and forth, and I know that the loss of trade days completely, I mean, we were looking to up the number.
Mhm.
I mean, when like I said, when I first started here, the number was at 5, and then it dropped to 3 at some point, I don't remember when, and then it went to 2.
Yeah.
And I know that there have been lots of complaints about there only being 2 options for trade days. Now, also, when I first came, it was that was all you got was a trade day. Then it kind of morphed into you could choose a trade day or compensation.
Now we pretty much pay everything.
And now,
Yeah,
like, it kind of morphed into, do you want to get the trade day or do you want compensation? And then it morphed into, or what you'd like it to morph into is just a compensation, right? So that, but what we're seeing, well, that's a separate issue, really. If people are, and the problem that you have with the trade days is because the only time they can take the trade day is during another day where training would be offered. Is that correct?
It limits the availability of days where a training could be offered. And we heard, you heard loud and clear, we do have the best standards coming down. We have, and so when do we do that training? When you start looking at the 14 days, I didn't bring my trade day folder with me. It's the 14 days of non-student, I think it is, and don't quote me on that. You take off this day, you take off that day, you take off the days preschool that are untouchable, you require training days, which is training, we understand that. Not really, the purple days, I guess is what I'm looking at, but it's okay. Don't quote me on it, you want to
Kevin
go.
just gave you one example really quickly. So the January day coming up is a trade day. Teachers can use a trade day option, right? And so it's also the start of semester 2. So that's just another day where a principal could, right, do something with the whole staff to kick off the semester, et cetera. Let's regroup, let's reboot, let's reconsider our data, et cetera. But you have a certain number of teachers who will be there because of the trade day. So Kevin, we literally just chatted about this before my driving over here.
And and I'll, again, it limits because again, the offering of the days and again, the language that's in here is we have the trade days, but then the guidelines we meet, discuss, we iron out and approve and so forth. But any of the expanding the number of possibilities, and if this was my staff here, on any given one of those days, some people might be choosing to take a trade day, great, good for them, but then I can't do a training that I need all my staff to hear. And so when we talk about the trainings that we need to get through, and you guys know, I mean, it is a lot, and we've got requirements from the state. It's like, really, it's not, I don't want to blame the state, but I mean, we have requirements, and so we have to do them. And so that keeps eking into the opportunities. And if we try to do that during that day and not have my staff there, I can't afford for my one person who can do the training. You guys all have this, like something at your school that, you have your one the one teacher who's gotten trained to do the training. I can't say, hey, you're gonna do it all 4 days because we need to get, I mean, it adds to the difficulty of making sure that on teachers' time, right, within the contract time, we're able to provide the trainings. And Kevin has been very, he's been patient, but he also recognizes the, and when I say Kevin Hendrick, not Kevin Smith, I think you all were probably there anyway, but I just need to clarify. With the best standards, that there is training we have to get out, and he is struggling of making sure when to do this. And again, offering it, but on the flip side, Kevin is awesome with understanding some teachers may want to do that during the summer. And on the other hand, because you know what, I can think about it. But also we have teachers that do not want, hey, last day, I'll see you the first day teachers are back. And that's great. I mean, that's fine.
Right.
But we have to be able to provide that to them. So with the number of days we keep crossing off, You know, here, we want to give some uninterrupted, we have the uninterrupted planning time in there. We have, you know, we still want to be offering that. It just makes it difficult when that is the reason why your language was rejected, right? About the 5, because again, that cuts into the amount of time because I could have many people being out on those days. We are more than willing and able to listen to back and forth and negotiate that. Again, we have our responsibilities to get training out and to provide that, but trying to balance that with respecting the time of our teachers to be working in their classrooms as well. And so it's a little puzzle, right, that we try to work on each year.
Right, but we would, I know that we were trying to look at the schedules to see, because to be honest, personally, I never had trade days because I didn't choose, but, because I didn't like where they were placed. It was like, I don't need trade day, I just had the whole summer off.
Right.
I don't.
And other
need trade
people
day
will
on
go,
the very
and
first
other
day.
people go, I need to extend my vacation for something, and I already did a training, Paula, so I want to just not come. We
Right, no, I know, I
understand,
get that,
everybody
but
has a
I'm saying-
different,
But I do know a lot of, they'll take it because they have a trade day and that's when they have to take it.
yeah.
But I think that placing trade days right next to the vacations, that's not what teachers need. A day off. They had their day off, they're rested, they're ready to come back and go. They don't need
Okay.
it.
Well,
But the
and
days-
that's the guidelines that we sit down and we kind of
Yes.
talk about that. Yeah.
And well, that was definitely before my time, because I never thought those were good ideas. Because most people, when you need that day and you legitimately say, oh, I have a trade day that I can take, it's usually somewhere in the middle of the year where you're,
Yeah, so,
you just need that day.
and just, I think I said this, and when I kind of explained the trade days
So
earlier,
where could we, yeah, I mean, where could we better place them where they don't interfere as much with those kind of things where you, like, I know, I mean, there's a ton of training. There's a ton of training that needs to be rolled out, mandated training, there's a ton of training that teachers take on their own, there's always tons of training. But the idea that every single waking moment that a teacher's not teaching, they should be training, that isn't true either, right?
And we don't do that right now.
We know that's not true.
and we don't do that right now.
No.
Right, I just want everybody to know that.
There must be at least 2 places in our year, even if you leave it at the 2. it would be great if
So are you
there
then countering back with going and keeping 2?
I would love to see 3 placed strategically through the year. I would love to see that in places where teachers could use a legitimate break. And if they earned it by doing training on their own time, they get that break. And that's where the idea of trade days came in ages ago.
Well, the
Yes.
point of trade days originally was, and I think I went over this, was because we didn't have the funds to pay teachers, or I'm so sorry, maybe it was just not a priority, structure our professional development fund for that. And so we recognized those trainings that teachers attended, and so we were doing the trade, which we could only do on non-student days, obviously. And so, but over the years, Dr. Grego's philosophy is to pay teachers for that training to get that infiltrated more. And so,
And the other reason too, that you did not have the whole week of Thanksgiving off.
that's right.
And so those 2 days.
Were
3 days
Thanksgiving.
Could be used for people to have Thanksgiving off. Now we have Thanksgiving off.
Which made complete
So,
sense.
The utility of it has kind
Right,
of been.
it's time to sunset that idea.
So what?
How long ago, because I'm really trying to remember, I don't even remember when I first got here, 20 years, do you know, like, when did Thanksgiving become the whole week off for instruction?
Oh,
Do you know?
I do not know that. I don't know. I do remember. Sorry, you guys do this, right? Where you guys, where were you when this happened? Oh my gosh,
Really?
But it used to be where the trade used to be able to pick from like 5 different days, but you could only earn 3 days of trade. But you
Right.
had more opportunities to pick from.
Right, so we have 3 options for 2 days right now, and because, again, that was you felt our need, right? Our need to have certain days that were available for staff to do training too. It's not, sometimes it's the school-wide discipline plan. We need everybody to hear that, but if half my staff is here one day, then my half the staff is here the other day, can you imagine why they're getting mixed? It doesn't, we have mixed messages because of that, or whatever. So that was absolutely right. That was probably one of those reasons why it started moving to that.
But I also have to be an advocate for those people who feel, yes, you're paying us for trade,
Mhm.
for training, which is great, but it's still not near an hourly rate.
Correct.
A lot of people.
Right.
And so a lot of teachers will take that trade.
Yep.
Because they're getting dollar for dollar.
And a lot of people will take the money though, because they're taking the
So
money.
it means,
Again, I think you're exactly, I'm not gonna argue, because that is your, but I will hear from other people, that, no, I take the money, I'm not, So again, it is a large organization with a lot of people's different situations. And so we, as a group, need to figure out where are we in the middle to address the needs of our teachers.
what I see is a possible, I know you're saying to us that you would like that that January and that week when you come back, back to school, that first day.
Mhm.
So then what other days can you offer the teachers that?
So we have our 7 preschool days, right? And we have our end of our first quarter, the October date. We have our either right before winter break or right after winter break. We have a February date. We have a March date. And we have our day after school. Get that. That's it.
And right now, how many options do they have to pick from?
3.
2, they have 3 options to pick from.
3
First day,
for
last day, and January.
And
Not last day, I just want to say something about that, that's a terrible day.
Okay, so listen, I'm gonna go back and we could talk about this all night. I said the guidelines can be
That's true.
set.
That's what I mean. The options need to be better for both the teachers and for your uses. I mean, they're just that last day, of course, the teachers have stuff to do.
I also had teachers, I hear you. I would never take that day. I was never put together.
Yeah, it's good.
You can have a very last minute in your classroom. And if I say you got 3 days, they are our day, not
Yes.
I should walk around.
Right, right.
So that, and that's not, that might be nothing on the administrator, it's just the way things are, like now your classroom is moving, and I didn't know about it, and I lost the opportunity to take it a different time of year.
Right,
So,
right.
you know.
Yeah, I just think we have to look at the options, that's good, and whether it's days 2 or 3 or 4, I mean, give them better options for taking it
What about it?
that don't, but that also work for, placing training.
No, I don't.
Is that discussed in the PD council?
No.
I don't think we have that money.
Would it be?
Isn't that what we were doing? We would pay
It should be.
Yeah,
Should
Why don't
be.
we discuss it then?
Right, but it was required.
Where to take this
That
thing
could
off?
be-
I don't know how we get that.
Yeah,
And
I will throw it out there.
Yeah, I
That seems
would.
to be the bigger issue.
Much as I
What's
hate
that?
the
That seems
days,
to be
like,
the bigger issue.
I can throw it out there right now. I can't.
Yeah.
she's
Okay.
Is this something that could be worked out in the advisory committee also, professional development, like something that we can work on to meet the needs of both sides?
Sure, it does say, original language, and again, we struck it because again, we feel the need that we need to have a set schedule where we know that teachers are available for training. But if we want to come back with something else, that's what we're doing here, right? We've stated our reason, and that was our rationale and why we struck that through. The guidelines are stated that we would work will be jointly by the parties involved. So again, typically for the last 5 years, I've kind of run that through the president, and we have come to the understanding and agreement. If we want to expand that to the advisory committee, Mark Narpier is the one who, I think Nancy, I probably, because Mark was kind of new, and then, last 2 years have been whatever. So I kind of, exactly, right? And I know you were coming in and it was crazy, but you know, typically, Mark would be the one that would meet with you and so forth, and he is the one who runs that advisory committee. So certainly that can be something. Yeah.
I mean, there's gotta be something we can do to give so that everyone's needs are met, you know, and more appropriately and moving it, because I do think, like, the first day, I mean, maybe because of the 7 days, one of those days could be a straight day. And I guess the first day was one thought to be most, I don't know, I just didn't understand why that one was picked.
Because teachers said, I mean, again, we don't, it wasn't like we drew it, I mean, we did talk to, you know, this wasn't just like, hey, I'm gonna pick this out of the whatever, but somebody was saying, hey, if I can go, then I can just come back a day later. That was the, I mean, that's what was told, like, that's what was stated. So, you know, anything can be discussed and worked out. You know, it was in there because we had feedback from whatever group we were speaking to at that point.
We're happy to consider something that works, but the proposal to strike it is because the information we had is that it's not working. But we're happy to consider any ideas, and we will go back and get some additional ideas as well.
Ms. Maxwell, how many people would you say take advantage of the trade versus the step? Do you kind of have a rough?
Yeah, I do. Our trustee Dave Richmond had a payroll. I did ask that. It's in the same folder where the other information is tonight. And I can let you know that.
Yeah.
That might help.
Too.
It is not as, and for various reasons and reasons such as what you might have mentioned, it is not as, I was a little shocked at how many did or didn't do it. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be incredible.
I used to think trade all the time, and I did a ton of things like and I stopped doing trade for the reason that I just said. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to see it again.
Yep.
And it's like, it's not that I don't value the trade, but I really
Yeah.
do. I actually
Yep.
really like it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of teachers, and I think that's why the number was a little lower than I thought, because
And it's diminished
it
over the
is,
years. It has gone down over the years. Anecdotally, I can tell you that. I can't tell you that data, but I can anecdotally, it is reducing
Yep.
over the years.
Yep.
People aren't seeing the value in the trade.
But it's not, I don't think that the value to trade isn't there. I think it's
The opportunity.
that we can choose.
right.
Because like I said, if I wait till the very.
Yeah, then you may not take it.
And I can lose that.
Yeah.
day, And I may not even know that that's gonna happen.
Yep.
Until I lost the middle, you know, like I said, oh, I don't want to trade that day because I don't want to.
Right. Okay,
That makes sense.
all right.
Okay, 14. Oh, right, that's what I was saying, just it might be the pizza. Yeah, that's why I said it's almost 5.
I was just gonna say, let's take a break at 5, so, but.
Yeah.
See, sometimes we are on the same page.
Nancy, I think we're on the same page more than you think.
When it comes to food, apparently.
I'm not gonna argue with
I'm
that.
right there, baby.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, the last thing on that was that we used to, can you explain to us, because our reps asked again, the rep school, that used to be, that they could earn a trade day for rep school, because it is actually in the evaluation that for being a rep, you get, I forget what domain it's in and what it's called, the element in the domain, but if you're a rep, you get a high grade on that because you are actually helping the culture of the school and working with other teachers. So the training that goes on that day is all about how to develop the relationship with your principal, how to develop a good relationship so that you can work together as a team. That's what all of that is about, and it is very beneficial to the school, and that's why we used to get a trade day for it. So the reps were just wondering why that was stopped, and it was stopped a few years ago. Then it was weird, it was stopped, then it came back very briefly, and then it stopped again. So, but I don't understand why, because that's actually a very important training for the health and culture of the school. And it's gone, that's what our focus is all about during that training, is how to do that. It's also learning about the contract so that they can be familiar with the contract, but it's more about, you spend hours this time on how to work with your principal, how to approach things, how to become a partner with your principal so that these things could only just, because that takes time and it takes a little expertise. And it's a pretty important, I think it's a major importance, because if you do it well, it really changes the culture of the school. I mean, which we learned, and it took a while because I had 3 different principals, so it takes a while for each principal. But when Brett and I, or John and I, got into that rhythm where we were totally trusted each other and could really work on everything, it made an enormous difference in the school. There was far fewer issues in the school. And that's where we would like, that's what we like to see, obviously, at all our sites, is that development. And that's what we work on. So I would just like that considered again, that it's a valuable, if we're gonna keep trade days and offer them, that's a valuable training that goes a long way to covering everything else. So that's all.
Okay.
That's all I got to say about that. So it is 5:05. And we're up to 16?
15.
We added an E.
Oh, E, sorry.
Right, Article 15, we had added all changes in programs, as well as all new curricular programs shall be voted on by the faculty at the school site, requiring a majority vote of those voting to approve before implementation. So,
Can I ask a question, Nancy?
sure.
Okay. So I can't remember how many years ago, but maybe 4 AP Research and AP Capstone, they came on board, they're elected classes, right? Is that would that be something that before we could bring a new AP offering to a school, that we would want to have a vote on that? Is it, can you clarify? Okay.
Years ago, when I worked at Menlo Park Elementary, there was a new reading adoption that was separate from what the district was doing. And at that time, the school didn't get it, the staff didn't get a vote on it. It was either this is what we're doing, you say, or.
That when they were going into
That was,
status?
that was years ago.
Was it when they were going into DA status?
No, this was before that.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is, and there are times, and even recently, within the past couple of years, even at Eisenhower, where grants or different things will come up, and it's like more or less like, we're told we're doing this, it's not a staff vote. You know, whether it be added in elementary schools, or, use the units of study at, another elementary school, or kindergarten is in town, that they have to use the units of study to teach their writing curriculum. But those numbers involved didn't have a say on that, and doesn't necessarily match the district's modules. So it tends to go to that of these different curricular programs that where the staff should have a say in it.
I think it's more often happening in elementary schools.
Well, when we talked about it in July, it was mainly this because I have my notes from July. It was something about a pre-AP, middle school maybe.
That was also.
And
Oh,
the examples were like Coast Guard, JROTC, and they were talking more about the magnets and the academies. And somebody was mentioning it pulls away their students from other,
As does every
courses,
elective
right?
offering, a
So-
school chooses to offer their students, it's typically an elective offering because the students have said, I want this elective, or there's a certification that's attached to a class, right? We do that as well. Like cybersecurity, for example, you put in a cybersecurity course of study, and there's a class 1 and a class 2 and a class 3, and by the time they get to that class 3, the kids can earn the certification. It's just a course of study. It's not, do you know what I mean? It's just open to the kids in the school.
So now I hear some further,
That's not it?
That's a
Okay.
minor thing.
Okay.
Just adding a here there.
Okay.
You have a whole new program come in that takes 20% of your program students away and consults is what we're doing. And we were chosen, to be there. So the middle school with AP, pre-AP, they weren't given any choice.
So, right.
And I think people just want to be heard, just want to be part of the process. That's, we got away from that again, we need to get back to, it used to be part of the process.
Right, and I can't remember the name of the program that was put into for math, and they switched over and had to do it all, it was an online program. And the teacher, you was just foisted on the teachers what? Carnegie,
Yes.
and yes, that was it, and it was actually providing lower results than the teacher who was blowing it off, kind of, to be honest, because she had been teaching, it was geometry for a really long time. Her scores were still coming out through the roof where the other ones were low. And it was,
it's all about the
it's just something, it needs to be discussed with the people who are going to be putting it into play. Because input brings by.
You know what I was meaning, and I want to clarify that, it's not all about the teacher, let me clarify that statement. A great teacher, because we've heard this from teachers, I can use any program, and what my skill set, and what I think you guys are saying, it is how great a teacher is in spite of whatever it is that they may.
Oh, no, I would never have said that, if I was.
Oh, I hear teachers say that, so I'm so sorry.
I would never say that.
You did, and thank you for looking at me, because I wanted to clarify that, so.
No, I would
I value
never,
the skill set of
ever get the
teachers
same
greatly.
results using an online
Greatly.
program, no way.
I'm not saying that,
Yeah, I know.
I'm not saying
I know
that.
that for a fact.
Well, yeah, okay.
And I also think that what we learned from the pandemic is that students on computers do not do as well as students in a class with a live teacher interacting with them all the time. Because kids who were virtual, had a live teacher, but a lot of their stuff was put online because they were virtual. Did not show advancement in the same way that the children in the live classes were. And we said that all along, even
Okay,
though
so
we obviously were advocating for virtual options because of safety purposes.
Of course.
We knew, all of us knew, that is not the ideal method of teaching.
Well,
It
what's
don't
benefiting
work.
one thing is gonna have a
And
negative,
anything that's
impact
based
on something else.
online, computerized, based online,
So-
will never surpass
So
that
this was-
interaction between student and teacher. So that's why.
This was one example, on the virtual was one example, I think, of many different types that have come down. The units of study is not virtual, the other things that were mentioned before. The statement here can't be accepted because that would require, it says all new curricular programs. We are required by the state to have state-approved reading programs, math programs, and so forth. So the statement as written has to be rejected. And so I'm explaining why we struck that, okay?
That makes.
So if you would like to come back with some other language that might have,
So possibly clarifying that we're referring, because if the district has to adopt the curriculum, or the district adopts the curriculum, it's gonna be used across the board, that's one thing. But like Paul was mentioning, a site electing to use a particular program or particular curriculum
That's
within
different
their
than
own
the
walls.
district adopted.
Yeah,
That's something-
different than district adopted, and that sometimes I will, again, I think we have to look at the language, because again, I'm not going to pigeonhole, and that's why language is so great, because we have to look at something that is not going to negatively impact possibly a group of schools moving forward and so forth, and we do have very skilled, I think everyone, well, I'm not gonna say that. So anyway, I think our teaching and learning department is very in tune to what we might agree or not agree on some things, how it's being rolled out or some things, but their intent is to address every student who has a need. And so how that goes about,
And to be honest, that's the way I read it, having being,
yeah, but
new to
it
the
doesn't, that's not how it's
situation.
written. Yeah.
When we had B already was there, the board agrees to union involvement in curriculum. But then this additional language, I think, the way I'm reading it was exactly that, to focus what happens at the actual site, at the site.
And so you come back with some counter and we'll.
Because then maybe we have to, it's something, I think more of the issue too is not having these options, but if you put in a lot of options in.
Okay.
I don't know the name, I can't remember the name of it. I used it during, when we were virtual.
Canvas?
No.
No?
No, when you went on the programs, when you had to go get.
Oh.
Clever?
Clever, thank you. That's what I mean, there's too many, this is.
Different programs.
All right.
So, I mean, the fact that they put all these options into Clever that you could opt for based on the age you were teaching or what you were teaching. There were a couple of really good literary, literature sites in there, there were a couple of really good, grammar sites that were actually aimed at younger kids, but they came in pretty handy, because high school kids are not great at grammar sometimes. So, I mean, I would use those. But what's happening in some sites is they are demanding, you must use them 70% of the time in your class. You must use them 50% of your day. There's where we start to run into the problem. It's like, the teacher should be creating the curriculum for the class and deciding, as they do, this is a good day to use this, I can use this story from this site in Clever, and we can all work, we can do that, or not. It's a fact, it's a resource that has become a mandate, where they are now demanding that you have this much of the time spent on there, this much of the time spent on there. That's when I think teachers start balking against it. I think they like having the opportunity to pull from a lot of different things that might be very helpful. It certainly helped me when we were all thrown into virtual and I didn't know what the heck I was doing. It was incredibly helpful to have all those options. But I would not have liked in a regular classroom to be told, you must use this a certain number of days a week or 70% of the time or whatever they're being told. It's different in different places. I think that's where the problems are arising. And maybe we need something we need some language to clarify that.
Or counters to new language.
So that's what I'm thinking is more of the issue than
So the counter is going to be this new language.
new language for
Yeah, I'll
explaining
come back.
that more explicitly.
I'll come back, because to be honest, and I just want to interject really quickly. One of the things that came to mind when we were writing this was Stephen Covey. There are a myriad of programs that Covey puts out that are adopted by middle school, and I don't know if they're taken in here or not. But a lot of the time, something along those lines, like it's leadership training, they have a bunch of different options that they use. And there's something that trotted out in elementary schools, middle schools to teach character. And it's not a bad program, but it is an additional program. And at this point in time, when we've got a plate that is so full, popping something else onto that plate as a requirement at a school is something that should be, everybody should have a voice in. You know, if we're all going to do this Stephen Covey technique or this Stephen Covey program at Fountain Elementary School, then everybody who, in order to get the buy-in, everybody who is involved in it or wants to be involved in it should be given a chance to talk about it, and then there should be a vote. We're not talking, and I think everybody is kind of vocalizing, we're not talking about, reading programs, math programs that are adopted by the district.
Or
And that
elective
obviously
That's
is
right, that's true.
totally different, and we're already involved in that. It's just, well, up here in big. But the point is those things that come out of left field, and we all know these administrators, and I'm not talking administrators. We all know people who go to a conference in the summer and they come home with the greatest things they want to try at their school. And that's something that happens on a regular in a lot of schools.
Right, which is a great thing for a leader to do.
Yep.
It's a great thing for an administrator to be psyched about something that they've seen somewhere and want to bring it to their school. But if you're really a good leader, you understand that you've got to generate that excitement that you're feeling when you were introduced to it in the people who are going to implement it. And when you involve them in the decision making, you're much more likely to get buy-in and it's going to be successful. The reason a lot of things don't work in the schools is because the teachers weren't given that buy-in and they were treated more like, just here, do this. And that's a whole different, it's the way you make a person feel about their craft. It's a profession that is an art as well as a science. So when all of their autonomy and thought is taken out of it, there's a resentment that stays. And it might have been a great program, and had they been introduced to it and said, what do you think, can we talk about this? You're gonna get a whole change in attitude in how it's introduced. You're gonna get a whole different feedback, rather than walking in and saying, we're doing this. I just think that.
So if I just can
That's
respond,
what we need to be looking for.
Article 15 is a permissive subject of bargaining. Curriculum delivery, that's a management right. We recognize what you just said, Nancy, and that's why the language in Article 15 was agreed to years ago. It doesn't need to be in there. It's not required to be in there. It's a permissive subject of bargaining. But I think the parties years ago recognized that it's important. There's teacher involvement, there's union involvement, and that language already contemplates that it should be a group effort, school-based, and there has to be buy-in. I think it's the language right now contemplates what you just described. We would not agree that there's a veto power by the staff on the curriculum and what's delivered. But we do agree that there needs to be buy-in, and that's what the language currently says.
Well, again, I want to reemphasize that not having been here for the previous meeting, my reading of this was taking B and proposing language that made it more specific to what happens at the school site. And a permissive subject of bargaining, you're right, it is a permissive subject, but once it's been bargained, then it's not just that language is set in stone and that we never have to talk to it ever again. Once the parties have agreed to bargain it, it becomes a subject that is open to bargaining going forward. And so I don't think it's unreasonable to to propose it, though certainly it's open to a counter proposal. And just like we've agreed to bring some counter proposals, y'all can certainly do that as well. I think that what E is doing is taking that same spirit of union involvement in curriculum and putting it in, and I can understand why you wouldn't agree to a veto. I can understand that, but I don't think it's unreasonable to talk about what B means at the site level and to bring some clarity to that.
No, it's not unreasonable. I mean, but as we're bargaining, we could decide we wanted to take this out altogether because it's now open book. That's not our feeling.
You could propose it,
We
certainly.
could propose it, that's right, and we would never take it to impasse because it's a permissive subject of bargaining. We agree that we need input from teachers, and that's a good leadership style to make sure that the people you're leading are on board with your ideas. And that's why it was in, and we agree with that. But we don't agree that E has a majority vote, and that essentially gives a veto power. So we don't agree with that, and that's what Brian just said. So that's why I made my comment.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I was touch.
You can touch.
And then if y'all want to
We finished. Yeah.
It's just the one you know, outside of the pool.
No, I'm not gonna take it. Oh, now. I'm in the south and I've been outside. So I'm like, oh, that, somebody.
Oh.
That one right there.
Papa Shack.
We're at 17.
16.
Sorry.
Good try, though.
Yeah, we're
Nancy.
still thinking.
Yeah.
This is why I'm an English teacher, numbers is equal time. So we just looking over the guidance.
So I think we had some, again, I think we had some lengthy discussion just regarding paperwork, reducing the redundancy. And so that is why, after the conversation, we came back with our proposal to state, without jeopardizing required data collection, the administration will consider efficiency and work to reduce any redundant paperwork through use of computer technology. As I think some of the conversations or some of the examples were shared with us, and we recognize that, and so that was our counter.
I would say that in addition, well, to build on your counter, I think it's going in the right direction in terms of making electronic or working electronically when we can to reduce paperwork. But I think that there's also a question of what information teachers are still even required to produce. And I think, and that relates to the first part of your the statement, without jeopardizing required data collection. What would be important for our teachers is that they would not be responsible for reproducing data that's available to administrators. So if there was a meeting or some sort of PLC or any other kind of data analysis, and they're being asked, okay, well, come with this information. That's not something that, if it's available to administration, that's not something that the teacher should have to reproduce. If I, as an administrator, can click in a system and pull up the same information, it shouldn't be on the teacher who's front-facing kids all day to, in the classroom setting, to reproduce that information. So I think even though this definitely speaks to streamlining and bringing it into more of an electronic format and reducing the stacks of paper, that absolutely is going in the right direction. But it does need to address that teachers should not be responsible for producing something that is already available to administration. It's just sort of taking on that role when it need not be that way. So that would be something I think that you have to go further than what the prior is.
Well, that's right, what we had asked for was something that used to exist, about having a committee in each school that is just a subcommittee, that includes the principal, obviously, and their designee, and at least the faculty rep. I mean, I thought that was something that used to, so that those kind of things could be discussed on how to best streamline everything. Because sometimes, principals are not specifically aware of everything that the teacher is actually having to do, paperwork wise. And I think having that conversation, that could be at the beginning of the year, could be, it doesn't have to be, they don't have to meet very often. But I think that it could be very helpful if they can work it out side by side, because I'm sure it differs side by side as well. And that's why I thought that was helpful information to try to encourage, again, collaboration on correcting the problems that exist, so that they can work as a team to figure out what's the best way, how can we do this best, reduce the paperwork. So I would like that to still be considered, if we could put together teams to do that. It has certainly helped with meeting scheduling issues, except for the fact that I was missing so many, poor Jody had to go find a million of them for me. But I so appreciate, I mean, I was so appreciative, and I did pass them out to the appropriate NSC and kept my copies, so I thank you again for that. Because we don't always get our copy, but it just actually helps having that group together to work through those meeting schedules. It seems to really solve any question. It's resolved a lot of former disputes or conflicts, having that group work on that, and they only have to come together once a year. This group could also come together maybe once or twice, twice a semester, once a semester maybe. And only if new things arise, which says it's a smart move for a problem like that. So I'd like that to be considered. Now we're at 7. So initially, what we were attempting to do here was to put them all together.
No, that was my policy. So 2 Article 17, and we were looking at the best way to present the information. I think we agree that the first one. We talked about the second one.
Because, well,
I'm so sorry, I'm trying to follow along, I'm not hearing you, I'm so sorry. I was trying to put the words together, I couldn't do it.
What I was saying was, when I wrote it up, I think I had plenty of quick on the road now, Article 17 or 2 of them. Mainly because we didn't know how to combine 17 in the nation or whatever, so we put a vote on the table. And I think the last time we spoke about it, we spoke about the second one, because that's where my notes on the language itself are. And the second one, as it was presented, I looked for the difference. So differentiate.
Right, so yeah, you didn't have a problem with changing the name.
Right,
Right, because that was one of the main problems with that, was the name had a negative connotation, involuntary, right?
we had that conversation, right,
Right,
about
so
that.
that was that it would just involve the districts, transfer.
Right, which we went ahead and did.
Yeah, but I like that, I'm looking at yours, now I looked at mine, and ours, and I'm looking at yours. And you see that wasn't an issue, you did leave it as two separate articles.
We did, yes.
And so now.
Right, I did not pay attention, we did restart the fee, right?
Yes.
I apologize.
It's definitely separate.
So we were asking for teachers in tier 1 or tier 2 schools to be able to transfer twice. a year.
Right.
Instead of just toward the end. And that would be a semester, prior to semester break, obviously, to eliminate major uprooting of kids. Because what happens is that at a certain point, like all these jobs open up and they don't have access. Our teachers that are already here don't have access
Right.
to any of those jobs because the transfer is over and it's not to refer them until the end of the year, toward the end of the year. And they miss a lot of, sometimes the perfect job, the job you've been wishing for, pops up.
Yeah.
Like, a CJA job, Pinellas Park High School. It just popped up. An average job at Pinellas Park High School, 2 jobs I was trying desperately to get moved into when I was working at Pinellas Park High School. So, but so it just means that our people, who should always be our primary interest rather than people from outside the system, are getting short shrift as far as having an opportunity to get a job that comes off mid-year. Or I get that we can't have them just transferring all the time all year long, because that, first of all, usually that's not such a major issue. This year, jobs are constantly coming up, obviously, this is an unusual year. But normally that's not as big of an issue. But they do come up sometimes toward the end of semesters, and we just like those teachers to have that option, to make a choice, and to have the option. I think a lot of teachers, unless it's like I said, their dream job that they were always hoping for, most of them are gonna opt to stay with their kids. But I would say they need to have the option at least, because there are definitely people who have asked, why can't we apply for these jobs? There's so many jobs opened up, and there's so many jobs that I wanted. Like, this is not the transfer period.
It certainly helped with long-term teacher retention, which we need help.
That's what it's like, and then I know, the goal is to try to keep teachers teaching and happy, so that they're happy to be here teaching. So I think this would go a long way, to giving them at least one more option to keep an eye on jobs and maybe they move.
I want to emphasize how much, and this is something about the work that we do. Overwhelmingly, members will say that whether they're looking at potentially taking a leave or applying for, or being what can be considered for a transfer, overwhelmingly, their primary concern is, but I can't leave my students, but what's going to happen to my students? Like, I think it's just important to state that when people are looking at transfers mid-year, they're not doing it on a whim. The vast majority, there's always going to be exceptions, but we very frequently have to talk to people about, okay, this is how you need to, how can we walk through this decision making in a way that is not only caring of the students, but also of you and your family and your health. And there's many factors that can be part of that, but almost without exception, your overriding concern is, but if I'm not there, what's happening to my students? and it's just important to state that because it's really, when people are looking at opportunities, like you said, the dream job, when people are looking for opportunities like this, generally their circumstance is very, for them at least, very exceptional. It's not something they're entering into or would try to enter into, right? Whether they're being sort of pulled in one direction or they feel as though the school that they're at is not the best fit. Not the best fit for them. Either way, it's just, they don't, almost as a rule, do not take it lightly. And always think about the students and how what they're doing affects their kids.
Yeah, that's definitely true. There were teachers who reported to me and didn't even have anything to do with them. It was, that they were rearranging teachers from all grade levels because they couldn't find, let's say, I don't remember the specifics, but let's say they couldn't find a third grade teacher, and that's where the vacancy was. But they got an option for a really good fifth grade teacher was available. So they hired the fifth grade teacher, and the fifth grade teacher was only capable of it, so had to move them and then had to move and get another teacher to accommodate and get everything covered by a certified teacher. And this other teacher wasn't even involved, was just like, I thought we weren't supposed to disrupt students mid-year, those poor kids they're all getting changed teachers. I said, well, it's obviously because they needed to put a teacher in place and the teacher wasn't qualified to teach what was open, so they had to move things around in order to get that. So it is definitely something that people don't, including the teachers, don't want to disrupt kids mid-semester or, if they certainly don't. The teachers feel that way as well. We just think that the option needs to be open for them to,
It's the domino effect, right? That's
yeah,
the problem.
and it is.
So, but it's something we understand. It's the perfect job you've always wanted opens up because someone decides to retire in February and it's not transfer period. I can see the hardship there, and the option is now put in a sub or hire
Or post and
or
hire a
post
new,
from
yeah.
outside,
yeah.
and that.
So we did, I did take this back to my team and we had discussions about that. And again, this is nothing that we haven't been talking about over the years as well. We hear, we have heard this, other districts and so forth. But it really is just, it does create an issue. And again, I welcome anybody to come to our department during transfer period in the spring, and it's happened. And but regardless, we will do whatever we need to do to make that work. But again, we read the pros and the cons with this, and right now we're just not ready to accept that, which is why it wasn't in our. Sure.
One that just want to talk about is, for example, we have a that I don't know, but I contribute because I'm transfer period is on the way. But let's say, for example, I go over and talk to the administrator about how the process works out. And I apply for that job. I interview that job, and I say, okay, doctor, we will hold it job until a convenient time when we can make a swap, if there's a break or Thanksgiving or whenever that position. And there, yes, there are a lot of moving parts in this, but it might be a way to show some of the folks. And the other piece of this is my concern is the 26 probationary non-renewals last year and the 21 or 22 districts so far. I think it might behoove us in the middle of the teacher shortage to look at, okay, that's not a good seat on the bus. This might be a better seat on the bus for you, and not even go through the probationary dismissal process, but go through the transfer process to move them into a position that might be a better fit. I'm just looking at this as a retention process. I mean, the reality is, I know it's your legislative do it right to everybody or anybody that you feel is not a good fit. We're going in a different direction at this time, or whatever phrase you want to use. But the reality of it is you money in somebody and you bring them in.
Right.
You pull money, and I'm not talking about, 47.5 on a salary plus benefits, I'm talking about your time, and your time doing training for
Right.
raise.
Mhm.
All those things
Yep.
add up. You've got an
Absolutely.
investment in somebody.
Correct.
Don't kick them to the curb.
Right.
Let's put them in a place where they can be beneficial with it.
Right, certainly if there was
And
spots
if
open
there's
all over
spots
the place.
open,
Right.
you know,
And probationary dismissals have the right to reapply,
I
and I know
understand.
that's not what you're saying, but I just wanted everybody to know, because if you're not in it, you probably don't know that, so, that they do have the ability to right away turn around and apply and for positions.
Right, and I understand that part of it, and that's something that I've heard, on several occasions. The problem that we have is, sometimes, stressful costs.
Yeah.
I've got a young lady who's doing everything she can to get a PESA job, an ESP job, after being in the classroom for a good portion of the year so far. She can't even get a job as a parent. Because the administrator had I don't know, I'm assuming, but it's not assumed, there was a conflict of some sort between the two. And she was probationary dismissed. Now, we're all right, the statute says, you get probationary dismissed without any coverage.
Mhm.
That's understandable, but that's understandable that probationary dismissal happened, but I'm thinking this person is an incredible educator who is now can't even get a job as a parent because of a personality conflict or because of a conflict, call it whatever you want. I'm just putting it on the table as an option to help some of these people and to help this district because you've invested money. You've got people that you're basically showing the door. You don't need to show them. And I'm not talking
Find
about
another door.
Yeah, find another door.
That's
Find
the
another
thing.
seat on the bus. I'm not talking about somebody who's committing egregious.
Right, exactly, we're not, that's not what we're talking about.
Well, I'm talking
They
about
need to.
one issue of personal conflict or whatever that doesn't gel as a site and see if it works that.
He had his hand up, so I'm not sure.
So what were the issues that came up? The
It
issues-
is just dealing with staffing, and it is really dealing with an upheaval. And again, I think you mentioned it right at the beginning, and I understand there are reasons why students get different teachers throughout the year. It is a concern. It's not to say that we cannot continue to have this discussion, but
Yeah.
right now, of moving a teacher from one school to another, I understand that it would now, you still have a class without a teacher. We get that. But now we have moved a teacher to another site, and now we just have the other opening that now this group of students doesn't have a teacher. Now, I'm not saying one group of students is important over the other. I'm not trying to say that. But again, it is a process, and it is a new process, and it is a process that we would have to work through. What time? What range of window? There is a lot to think about. It's not just putting it in the contract and saying, let's go for it. Because, everything, you're saying close, well, and you're saying close the semester break. Oh, November 15th, there's an opening. I want that now. Well, no, we're not near the semester break. So when, there are those intricacies. It doesn't mean that it can't be, worked out, but right now, no. We would need to continue that conversation. What other sections in this?
Oh, the one that, we were looking for the similar language that PESA has about in transferring.
I'm sorry, can I go back to that? I'm sorry, I don't mean to, so I hate telling stories, but I'm going to tell a small one here.
Okay.
So when we don't allow this sort of thing, we're going to end up losing teachers to charter schools or other districts, which is essentially what has happened at my school. I've had a teacher leave the district and go to Hillsborough. I've had a teacher, 2 teachers go to a charter school. And this is at a school that really can't afford to lose teachers, but I would rather lose them to another Pinellas County school than like they're leaving, And they might be leaving for other reasons at my school. They're leaving, I feel as though, and again, you're not saying no, you're saying this needs to be looked at.
Yeah, I just can't write it.
But just one more thing, they're already leaving, I would love to be able to keep them in the system for some reason.
Right,
Done.
because you're leaving to go to other places other than another Mills County, so those kids are being shaken up anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, so sorry, I didn't mean to
So, yeah,
derail
I-
progress.
no,
Let's
but
go back to progress.
I get what you're saying, is that, and it just seems that when it suits the district's needs, many classes are ruffled and changed around because of need. I just wish that a teacher's need to get out of a bad situation possibly, or to have the job they always wanted, was as important as the district. Because I do think that that's what keeps employees happy.
And we can start to counter with other language and be more specific,
Yeah,
maybe,
we'll
with
see if we
dates.
can come up with something.
maybe
that'll be
over
less-
breaks or
less
something.
disruptive. The only other thing we announced for is that the distance traveled should be considered in place in transfers.
Oh, God.
That
So-
ESSA has the language.
So let me kind of maybe distinguish between the two a little bit. And again, I'm looking at when we put contract language to make sure it matches everybody, we a fine line, right? So I have a teacher who lives in St. Pete, South St. Pete, let's just say right by the Skyway, beautiful views, and is a biology certified teacher. And the only biology certified position I have is Clearwater High School. That's well over the 10 miles, I would believe. I'm not very good at distances, but I think so, right? I don't have the availability to stay within 10 miles. I am required to provide that teacher with a position and a job. They have a contract. I need to be able to provide them with that. I do not have a biology. And again, I'm just using that as an example, right? I know they probably teach, I'm not, yeah. So that's where.
Isn't this just proposing that these things should be considered?
Yeah, just consider.
They are
Well,
considered.
And I'm so sorry. So, okay, we already do that. It can be considered when we do, especially when we have our transfers, our involuntaries, and our people are calling. First of all, we talk to those people greatly and get their input, what are their wishes, their desires, their hopes, their dreams, blah, blah, blah. And we do that by north, mid, south. Sometimes we call them and say, I don't care where, right? But we do often, so we are doing that, I mean, so that's already in our practices and processes that we have in place. So, yes. Thank you for reminding me that we do that. I don't do that personally on the phone, so that's probably why.
Wait, but it is complicated.
Yeah, I just can't guarantee it. You're guaranteed a position, a salary position, but I can't.
If you said something like, if all else was equal, then they get the position closest to their home.
They
So-
already offered it.
If there's
Right.
3 positions open with their certification, if all else is equal, the more important thing, the certification requirement obviously is the most important thing.
Yeah.
That they just get
Again,
the most convenient. let's
yeah,
say.
I think the convenience, wishes, years of service, I mean, that is very, that's very broad. They shall be considered to the extent that these considerations do not conflict. So I think we have it in there. I think we do it. I will tell you, my partners really try to do a very hard job working with our people, and most of the time I do keep up and I said, okay, how many, we've got our number and how are they doing? And they're happy, they're pleased, so I don't think that this is an issue. And I don't say, I shouldn't say is much of an issue. Obviously, somebody might have a concern.
I think we had, the last thing we had asked for here is if you are Any teacher that doesn't transfer shall have 3 days to relocate and set up their new classroom. Right now, I think they have 1 day.
No, that is not accurate. When people are transferred, we work on that with our staff, and everybody is a little different. If they need an extra day, I always put out a day, and if they need more, I provide substitutes. I mean, that is what we do for them. So that they can pack up their room, we can get depending on the situation, right? Some people are losing units, some are gaining, I don't, but no, and if they need an extra day, they work with us and they say, no, we need another day. So again, that is a process that's moving along, that has been working. If there are issues with that, I'm the one you need to call immediately. And, but I think most people are, obviously the people who are gaining units and needing that teacher, they are probably a little bit more, come on. But I do think most people are giving them whatever time it is that some people just need a day, everybody is different on what they've got, where they're going. But again, we provide, it's usually a 1.5 week process of notification, and then got to give a day or two for them to pack up or distribute or whatever it is might be. So again, that's worked in, and if it's a major issue, then I need to know about it, because nobody has brought that to my attention.
Well, I personally don't have any experience with that, but I'm just saying that with this particular issue, I know that the NSEs put the reason that the NSEs came up with these things was because it was something these were things they came across. And they, not just enough to consider adding and saying you might want to think about this.
Okay.
So these are, so would it be helpful just to say any teacher district shall have up to 3 days? Or is it, because what is the normal time it takes them to move?
Everybody is different. The what?
I would think at a minimum, 1 day for you are, and 1 day to set up your new place.
Right, and again, sometimes it depends on the year, right? Or not the year, I'm sorry, it's time of year or whatever. I know sometimes there's a work day in there and some days there's not. I mean, it varies. So,
so if it's just that it should have up to 3 days, then it should be fine if they get 1, 2, or 3. Get the move done. There is coming out.
Being a teacher that was in this position, hired into the school, start of the year, and moved. It is a daunting process, because you set up the classroom, you had it going, then all of a sudden you have to tear it down. You're responsible for moving your stuff. Now you've got to set up a new room that you spent 3 days setting up for. It's a daunting, overwhelming process. And made worse by feeling pressured by the new school, you got to leave your new system.
right.
That's not good for the teachers, not good for the kids. The kids can last another day the way they've been, for the greater good of the year. So I feel like this is my own personal having experienced it. I'm not one to dilly-dally, I want to do it, I want to get it done. But I also don't think that it's okay to put that much pressure on the teacher. Let them know you've got 2 days, or you've got up to 3 days to get this set up, and nobody's going to come after you and pressure you to do it quicker than that. Because I have to have a level of comfort starting that with that new class, because it's already going to be difficult enough coming in after the school year started. I need to be able to have things in my room set up in a way that I'm comfortable with, not taking a week, but I feel like these teachers should have 2 to 3 days, because it's impossible.
So I will tell you, there have been teachers that have needed and taken 4 or 5 days. And that is because they were communicating And I know my partner said this, Paula, they need 4 days, fine. And it's a fine, take, give them another day if a sub, or whatever. If the school needs it, we give that to them. And so again, and I'm right there with you. I was bumped twice. So I've been there and done that. And,
But if someone's been in the district for 10 days, they don't know.
I'm so sorry.
If someone's lived in the district for 10 days,
Mhm.
they don't know who to communicate with. They don't know that they have that option. If it's not so bad.
When we're communicating, our partners we make the call to the teacher because we offer them we give them the options of the schools, they pick their school, we talk about the timeline, we say, okay, you have days you will have days, so many days to pack up, you will have so many days. A teacher who's only been with us probably 2 weeks probably hasn't read it in the contract anyway.
No, they have that protection.
Oh, but what I'm saying is you told me that they didn't know about it. So I was just probably telling you that I'm not sure if they have seen that in the contract either. But what I'm trying to tell you is our partners work with them and talk with their schools and so forth. And that's why some of them say, you know what, I've got a whole bunch of stuff. All right, you're gonna need 3 days or whatever. So we do that conversation with them. So again, when was that?
It's been about 6 months.
Right?
I've only been here 5, so there you go. So,
Well, you take that
but
back.
I'm gonna take that absolutely back. Yeah.
So what if we just said that, instead of having any number in there? Any teacher in district transferred shall work with their HR partner.
Yeah.
Shall work with their HR partner to determine the time frame for the move, to relocate, or however you want to say it. Because in this way, it can be anything from 1, and like you said, rare occasions 4 or 5. If we had it up to 3, that person who needed that 4th day would have been screwed. But, if we just put it in there, that they should be working with their HR partner. So even, so someone who doesn't know would be able to see in the contract that that's who they reach out to get that worked out. That might work.
Yep, that might work. Yep.
And the last thing was just, within the transfer period, and I know that this, again, it causes a cluster, you know what? But like in the beginning of placement process, and then, they get moved, they're in the transfer process, they get into a job.
They take a
get
transfer
placed.
to another school, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
A district transfer. And then they get placed. Quickly, which, and you laugh about, yeah, and then more jobs open up as the transfer period continues. Because we do know that a lot of principals release those jobs later in the transfer period. They release those jobs, there are constantly new ones coming up. And this person was already placed, and again, there it is, that's the job I want. And it came up after that person was placed. It is still during the transfer period, but they're locked in. So is there any way that can be manipulated a little bit within the transfer period?
Yeah, we did talk about that used to be in place as well. And again, I understand the teacher standpoint. We also hear from the school level standpoint that I have a teacher that, that has selected my school to come. And I understand they were displaced, get it, right?
Yeah.
And then it's a day before the transfer period ends, and now I have a school that forewent the whole transfer period, and somebody else didn't come because somebody took my spot, and now the transfer period is closed, and now that school is up. So everything we do is listen, I could win on both sides probably, but everything has a domino effect. I think I might have just said that. Everything has a reaction to whatever we do. Whatever is going to be beneficial to one is going to have a negative impact on whatever other party, right? And so we try to do what is kind of that best for the whole organization. And so we did not accept that. Again, I think we're taking a couple things back from this. So, again, let me take it back and go back to it again. But at this, again, we're not inclined to go back to that just because, again, I think we've also seen in other parts of this, it's like we implement something and then has a negative impact, so to speak, to one side, or whatever, and we want to change it back. So let me take it back, and see what might come of that.
Seniority. The seniority is
I think,
determined by Econ, right?
so, yeah, I think we talked about this, I'm so sorry, so you're asking, say that again.
Yeah, I'm just asking, it's predominantly determined by Nelson continuity,
Yes,
continuous service.
yes. I know you all had requested and at a school work site. We talked about this last time. It just doesn't make sense because it is continuous service in the district. But we did insert that of higher. That you had requested.
So there's no seniority at the school level.
The seniority is defined, again, seniority shall accrue on the basis of 1 year for each year of continuous service in the district. That's how we determine seniority. We do not have, if you're talking HR and district wide, we have district, again, it's continuous years of service in the district. So it is Pinellas County continuous. Is there, I mean, keep asking the question. I thought we had.
Yeah, no, it's just that there's, I mean, in a case where somebody gets moved from another school, and the bumping of people who've been in that school, the one coming in might have more seniority with the district, and they might have been at a few different schools. And if they're coming in and someone who's been at that school gets moved because they didn't have all of those years, but they were in that school.
So you're asking, let me see if I'm
That's
trying
where
to.
yeah.
I'm trying to infer what she's trying to ask. I'm not sure what the question is, so maybe Ginger.
Asking about the way, how we can better define the way seniority. I was the librarian. At the time, we had 2 librarians, and a different job title then. Two of us, one had more AD, one was a library. They cut one of the units. The person who came in, and there's 6, not even a full year, the same year they came in. I've been in there since 2001, I got cut. And that was my spot. I had to go back and talk after 13 years. So that's what we're talking about.
And that was only this lovely little space, right in the classroom on site, otherwise she would have been out looking for a transfer. And that's what we're talking about, is somebody who comes in with years of experience has priority over the person who's been in that building for a long time. And there is something to be said for longevity within a building. I think the security and, I mean, the way kids love to know that the teachers that are there are there, you know? These are the teachers of Pinellas Park High and, or wherever. It's important to them. It's important to their, what is the word I'm looking for?
Can I?
Stability.
Can I ask this? Can you describe your situation again? You were the library media specialist at your school. Oh, there used to be 2 units. And did they, okay, and then did the staffing model change? So now you only had 1 unit.
Correct.
So within the building.
Which is underrated. And, my partner was amazing, so it's not anything against her.
Right.
But she literally just showed up that year, and I got to move from a position that, I didn't, I think, very career.
For the next school, for the following school year.
Actually, it was 3-4 years before I had to wait for her to retire.
No, I'm so sorry. The staffing model was made for the following school year. Okay.
Correct.
And like I said, luckily, there wasn't a classroom position or one with her certification, she had a certification for English, so she was able to.
So this
teach.
is not,
But that, had there not been anything for her certification, she would have been moved to another school.
There wasn't.
Right,
There wasn't.
right, there was no English open.
yeah.
Could have been involuntary.
Right, that's
Wasn't
right.
an opening for school. She's right.
And that's the kind of thing that we would like to not see happen.
If she didn't have any certification. So if you had, and I'm so, I don't mean to jeopardize it with this one scenario, right? But it's like, it's getting the point across. Is you had certification for something in the school or you didn't have certification for
I had
something?
both, I had language and English,
Okay,
but there
so,
wasn't an English opening. Luckily, our admin teacher retired.
okay,
And I was able
right.
to
So if
stay
you
with her.
hadn't, if that person hadn't retired, then you would have been the involuntary.
Displaced, and,
Got it.
So you had more school-based seniority than this person who had
A
more
lot.
pecan seniority.
a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And we only consider pecan?
Yeah, well, when you're determining involuntaries, yes. But,
Let us talk about that. I don't really,
Yeah,
I don't fully understand how they
Yeah.
figure that in, but we need to talk about
I
it.
know, because that was always something that struck me as odd, because it used to be something well, the only other place I taught, New York, it was very important that, yes, district, it mattered how long you were in the system, but it also mattered how long you were at that school, because you established yourself at that school, and you were kind of part of that school, and it was valued, that was valued.
It's
So I
It
think
was
it's.
very important. I mean, I'm an alumni of that school. It was very important. That's my, that's my second home.
Yeah.
And so it was devastating when it happened. It really was.
Yeah.
I'm pretty touched it, but,
yeah,
That was bad.
Yeah. okay, let us kind of peruse that a little bit. It's the difference between.
By the way, guys, I just wanted to let you know, my ex-boss asked if I wanted an English position, because English position open. Another one, that was part-time.
We don't.
And he actually said,
Seniority.
"I'm going back to you." And I was like, "What do you think about that?" She said,
What
"Yep."
do we use school seniority?
Within the first year of somebody being out of school. I'll go over it.
Okay,
I'll go over it.
all right.
No, I have a hard time filling those positions. Every time they fill them, and then the English teacher leaves.
Do we want to make that proposal so we can talk about it, or do we want to talk about this? We want to talk about salaries?
I don't know if it's determined, I mean, I just look at the vacancy list, which, periodically, I've never seen any up there. Just doesn't seem to be changing.
No, we gave it to them.
Seems to hold very steady.
The one with the boxes, the green boxes. Yeah, yeah. we shared that. Here it is.
So, everything. You know what? It's Wednesday and I usually look at them on Monday, so now it's way back in the brain right now. We keep a very close eye on ESE, the other thing that we've noticed that an uptick is our pre-K, but we knew that going in because we expanded our pre-K now. But I will tell you, all the pre-Kers haven't really shown up. So I've tasked my people this week to find out, we have 7 pre-K openings, right? Well, and that's what they're looking at, but what I'm saying is the report I'm getting back is the kids, these were doubled up and tripled up on pre-Ks I'm sorry, not doubled up and tripled, I didn't mean that. A second, a third pre-K units, and the kids haven't shown up, so it's like a vacancy, and I'm just have it posted, hoping, if we can get somebody, great, and we'll fill it, but right now their numbers aren't, it's not over anything or whatever, so, but we're checking on that. ESC, it's across the board. It's not necessarily elementary, middle, or high school. I think they're almost evenly spread out. And with that being said, I think we have 9 openings right now. And I know, listen, I want to have nothing, I want to have 0. We have about 70 classroom vacancies, and that means ESE, that includes the pre-K. I did see this week, we got an update, you know, Hillsborough, I think, is up to 250 vacancies right now, but also I know that they are 2.5 times our size, so you kind of do that, you know, everyone's kind of in the same, you know, position right now, so, yeah. So Lindsay and Nancy, I know and we've probably talked a little bit about salaries. I don't want to stop right. I mean, I kind of want to pause for a moment just because I'm looking at our time. And I don't think we need to go into too much, but I know we presented our salary proposal to you the last time, maybe. I think, sorry, my meetings are now blended together. I'm sorry. The what?
It was 2 times ago because I was here.
Oh, okay, okay.
I missed the last.
But you kind of, when we talked, I think we said, well, what, you know, give us, or let's look at it a little bit more, whatever. We did, Kevin is out of town this week, or else he would be here with us tonight. Did put together, because we had said, well, look at some other options within the 11.6, and how you could spread that out maybe a little bit more as opposed to everybody getting the $14.95. So we have it. I don't have them all in color. Sorry, there was a issue with our printer, but I got one of the samples. So again, just wanted to, and hold on a second, I got to figure out which one. I know you guys just handed it to me. So okay, we have one colored one and then one that is not. Right? Okay. All right. So can you, yes. Yep. Although I gave them, no, you're good. No. And again, I think,
So, yeah.
I think when, once everybody gets it, I just want to kind of just talk like high level, and then literally we just wanted to, I know you had a concern about the differentiation and so forth. So again, Kevin put together just an idea out there, and you know, you told us to kind of look at some options, you know, kind of look at things and.
Right. Especially the guy who knows how to look at them.
The guy who knows how to do this.
The guy
and
who's
look at
got
that.
that number in,
Because I don't, she does,
Yeah.
I don't.
So
Really,
I'm gonna wait till everybody kind of gets those.
Yeah.
So again, we're working with the same numbers. I know, and I'll talk a minute about, you know, I know you had discussed longevity and so forth. The first, so the one that has the little 1 in the top right-hand corner, that's the one I'm gonna just talk really, and I'm gonna go over whatever. Remember the, and not remember, sorry, I didn't mean to say that, but the proposal that we had previously was $14.95, straight down the column for all grandfathered, remember? So this one is taking, and I believe this is not your colored one, so this is the black and white one, but if you look in the, probably the 4th column from the right, difference without the 144 referendum increase. You can see we put 1,200, and then he just put 1,575 from those middle, you know, those middle ranges between years 12 and 23, and then it drops to the 1,200. And so what that is that does represent 66% of this grandfather. Remember, we have, if you look at the bottom, it's 2,500 about employees that we have in the grandfather. This increase to 1,575, that constitutes 66% of that. And just something else to just note, Kevin, if you're wondering what's along the right side, that just shows what kind of what increase it goes from years 10 to 20. That's an increase of 10%. If it goes, and then it goes from 15, that's what he's talking about is from year 15 to 25, because it's right there on the 25th row. It's a 9%. Those that are at from 25 to 32, I'm sorry, to 31, that's an increase of 17%. Just kind of giving you the idea of the increases, right? And then 25 to 36, that's over 27% of an increase in pay. So again, from years 12 to 23, you'll note that the ranges range from, I'm sorry, the ranges range, that makes sense, Paula. The raises range from just over 3% to 3.4. So all those are above that 3%. Again, you can compare it to the other scale that was provided. If you go to the next one, this is now your colored one, I believe. This is number 2. What he did is just, he lowered that 1575 slightly to 1560. And it ranges then from years 12 to 32. So it goes a little further, well, it goes much further, from the 23 all the way down to 32. This does represent 91% of those that are on the grandfathered schedule. So you're looking at, the number of impacted employees. And again, the right side, I'll let you look at just the increases, and it's from 10 to whatever that row is. So, from 10 to 20, there's an increase again of 10%, and you'll see the 10%, 17 and 25. You'll note though that the range does from year 12 up to 32. The raise ranges from 2.45 to 3.37. So again, there was questions about the mid-level, and so I wanted to point that out. I also just wanted to share a little bit of information. It's not a whole lot, but just sharing a little bit about the conversation about longevity pay. And I know that was at the end of your proposal. We've been doing a lot of, I know you have sent us some stuff, I believe. I think we've gotten some things from other districts. We've been, checking, and discussing. And, one thing that we did note from all of and not all of them, because we've gotten whatever districts we can get, is a lot of our districts a lot of the other districts do stop at, say, year 29 or 30. We actually have some that have stopped at year 25. And then they have what they have been using as the supplement, right? The longevity. So they get an additional bonus, but they stop at year 25. So I just wanted to just point out, we are at year 36. We have about 6, obviously it must have been 6 or 7 years ago, right? We started adding the 31, and that was part of discussions and negotiations and so forth, that we're now at 36 years. So somebody who has been with us and is at year 36, according to a proposal here, could be making or will be making $74,000. Had we stopped at year 30, because I remember when I was a teacher, I thought early on it was at 29 plus. I don't know if anybody remembers those, but our salary went to 29 plus. Even if we stopped at year 30, that teacher right now would be at, look at year 30, right? They'd be at 67,000 plus a 500, I think is what Kevin had said, that they gave a 500 supplement for every year after that. So in fact, I mean, and it doesn't affect 20s, right? Year 20, but it does address some of those higher level salary steps. In fact, are getting a built-in longevity pay, because they could be making $6,800 more than they would had we just stopped at year 30. So again, we wanted to get this to you just for conversation purposes and so forth.
Are these just the proposals that are they just the grandfather scale? Okay, I just want to make sure.
So recognizing we still need to follow a statute that says the highly effective on the performance has to be 125% of the highest grandfather.
Right, which brings me to my question, if the highest grandfather is now 1575 or 1560, that now increases the grandfather highly effective to 1950.
Correct.
Which is an increase of another $85.
And because again, it's not everybody at 1495. There are people getting 800. Again, just on the sample, like we're throwing numbers in, we were throwing, Kevin was just giving a sample. Some went a little lower, while some went higher to address those mid-range people that there were some questions about. So again, just wanted to throw it back to you and show you, and then talk about and share that information with you. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
About 91% are represented.
Uh-huh.
That we mean.
So in between years 12 and 32, if you add up all those numbers of employees, that's 91% of those of the 2546 on the scale.
That's the same for both.
No, the first one, right, because it's only years 12 to 23, was 66%. Yeah. Kevin was just trying to expand it a little bit. Yeah. You're fine.
Oh, okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, I think it's still, there are a number of ways that you can move it around that, and would still meet the, I know it has a net effect in some of the other, on some of the other schedules. And with their statutory, that was one of the reasons that we looked at the supplements, because we didn't want to, like you said, the domino effect, if you change it over here according to the statutory formula, it has such a domino effect, and not because we don't want all of our people to get as much value as possible. It's not
Right.
that. It's just that we have to consider both the value and the equity. And so when we're looking at, like, it's helpful to have the percentage increase between steps or between a certain number of steps, and to see how much that value is in real dollars.
Mhm.
But one of the most challenging parts about that is addressing the equity piece. That I don't know that I have to look more at it.
Listen, that's why I said I don't think we're gonna get into a discussion tonight. I just wanted you to have it and with a little bit of explanation, and we can certainly have some problems.
And thank you for the proposal. I think we're always, we always have that eye for making sure that not only is the value there for our people, but that they're being treated equitably. And again, in all fairness, I think it's really important for people to understand that this formula is restrictive on everybody, and it's not coming from the district. It's
Right.
not, the Pinellas schools did not invent this formula that we have to work, that we have to work within. But the burden does fall to us, and I think appropriately so, to make sure that we work around it in a way that does show our veterans the most, that affords them the most, that the equity that they've been denied within the law. Or within the formula at the very least, while staying within the law. And so that's one of the most, I think, the most challenging pieces about this. I'm never afraid to take this on, because to be honest, we didn't try to fit in different numbers into the allocation or even mess with the allocation at all, because it was around the formula, because it is so complex.
Yeah.
But, we asked for other ideas on how to address this, and I appreciate
And I just think it was important too to recognize that, that the upper levels we made that decision a few years ago, more than a few, must have been 6 years ago, right? To start adding on a step as opposed to just remaining. And it doesn't matter then if you were at 31 years or 35 years, you would have been receiving the same salary. That would be a whole different discussion too, right? And I think we recognize that. And there seems to be a big chunk in that section too. So
well, and that's actually a really good art. It's a good example of exactly what we're talking about. So the similar situation that I've seen is like a shorter pay scale, like fewer years on the pay schedule. Like you mentioned that one of the surrounding districts goes up to year 25, and it's the same district I'm thinking of. Within that only became the case within the last 2 years. Prior to that, it was to level to year 23. And there was a constant push every year to have additional steps added. The challenge with it was because people said, I'm going to work till year 30, 33, and I don't see any raises. One of the things that we talked about in the value part of it was you want to be on a scale where you get to the top faster and you stay there longer. That ultimately builds your lifetime, your career earnings, it feeds into your retirement better than a scale that by comparison takes you longer to get to the top.
right.
And so there was a real value argument for getting there and staying there longer. But there also is this feeling of wanting to be treated equitably. So even if it was a minor $500, some sort of minor increase, it's still giving people, like you said, you've still given people the idea that, hey, you recognize the work that you've done, you recognize the diligence and the dedication that you have. This is a small way of showing you that we appreciate that, we appreciate you hanging in there. And it matters to people, you know, it's not so much that in many situations overrides their sort of sense of lifetime earnings. They want to feel as though they are progressively more and more.
I think that's
An equity thing,
what we
and
did.
so that's,
Yeah.
and so it's in that same spirit that we're trying to find a way to, yes, recognize the value that's built into the scale, but also recognize the fact that there is a group of people who have not only been here for decades and devoted their lives and their careers, but particularly when they could have at 30 years, 32 years, 34 years, at the beginning of the pandemic, just said, you know what, I'm good, drop enough and I'm ready to, this is just not something that I want to end my career on.
Right.
And they stuck with it during the most, again, arguably the worst time ever to be a teacher. So that is more than, it really does come down to more than dollars, it's the effort, it's the recognition,
And I think we have last year we added the next step. This year we continue to add the step. I think that, we're right there with you on that. I will, this is informational only. So again, you guys take it, do what you want. When you're ready to talk about it again, we're ready. We are coming closer and closer to Thanksgiving, to the winter break. We do have, we do know whenever our salaries are ratified by both parties, that we can do retro and we can get that back, retro pay and the increase in salaries. Those two, they have to be, and just so that you all know, it is those people who are on active status when it is ratified by both parties will receive that. So again, if we have retirees coming up and December is a hot month, people are done in December. I would like to just keep that in mind because it is our goal that we get that raise and so forth to our employees in a timely manner. But we recognize that we're still going to work on it and we will continue. So we just really wanted to give that to you so you could peruse it. And
that is one of the parts that's challenging about it, because first of all, is being conscious of the calendar, conscious of the timeline, but also, like you said, information and what we have to work with is continually changing. I know I talked about it in the support bargaining session yesterday, but just for the benefit of the teams today, we got guidance on, the state got guidance on, or put out guidance, we all received it on Monday, that they have opened up a very short window for ESSER 3 for funds under ESSER 3 or ARP. The districts have their applications for those funds. Y'all remember that there was a discussion at this, Florida was the only state in the country that applied for these. They said that no one had demonstrated a need. Well, so it turns out that wasn't accurate. So now they have opened this window for districts to submit their plans for that money, and it has to be submitted by November 12th. Now, my understanding was that while the state is putting that forward as a hard deadline, in fact, because it's federal funds, and in fact, the statute, the federal law in ESSER 3 was much more, because of the way that Florida had proceeded under ESSER 2. They wrote the law to be much more about directly passing those funds through to districts. And so even though there has been this deadline put on it, and it certainly is time sensitive, from what we understand, barring just an unreasonable delay, the districts will continue to be able to turn in those applications to receive those funds. The reason I bring it up is because even just this week, there's a major change to the district, to at least part of the district's anticipated budget. And that's what makes it difficult to navigate this, not only with the statutory limitations, I don't mean to say statutory limitations, formulas that are coming from the state, but also this another influx of major additional federal funding that becomes an issue, in our discussions around this. So it is, like you said, we're looking at this calendar, we're looking at this timeline, but we're also considering these constantly changing factors that have a direct impact on us. It's a huge challenge.
Yep. Okay.
Is it 5 to 7?
All right.
Look at me. I can tell. That's all time. So I guess we are not going to plunge into internal pay discussion.
The clock prevented that.
Saved by the bell. Or the clock.
I agree, let's draw a line under that one.
I think that's a good place to stop.
Okay.
Do we want to talk about next meeting?
Sure.
We'll get some dates and provide some.
You
have some things going on.
Nancy, could we touch base tomorrow morning? Because I will have my full calendar in front of me. I've got it. And we could touch base tomorrow morning and get them. I mean, you guys might want to peruse on dates that maybe are available for you, but
We have, excuse me.
It feels so much later than, am I the only one?
We're about to fall back.
Yeah, I was
I know
gonna say,
that.
get ready.
That's
It's gonna be way
my
worse
favorite
next
day of
week.
the year, favorite day of the year, it's my holidays coming up this Saturday. The fall back holiday.
Yes, that's.
in addition to the day after
Well,
Halloween, the day after the national championship day.
Yeah, so it's a good one.
My husband would be, Paula, my husband would be so energized to hear you recognize that he has long maintained that the day after the national championship
Yep.
should be, if not a federal holiday, then at least recognized by the school.
You could tell that I'm right, I'm there with them.
But which,
I
it's,
don't watch.
It better be the
football.
Super Bowl too again this year,
it's
right?
the time change in the spring though. Yes, you know, it is.
Ah, I hate that. Let's just
This,
keep with
this
winter.
dark at 4:30 or
Yeah,
whatever it's
I
gonna be.
hate that, but I mean, as far as getting up.
Yeah.
Every single year, every year,
Get up.
one day a year.
I wouldn't be at home
would be
when
right
it-
after that. And it got to the point where Monica, your mom, president, she would just call me and all I hear is hysterical laughing. And I was
I
like,
don't need.
who is this? She's like, Nancy, it's that day.
Oh my God.
You did it, and I'm like, get out of here. One day, every single year. She just got to the point where she thought it was hysterically funny. That I was gonna sleep right through and not make it.
Didn't you tell her this was, you're not supposed to call me, so I can continue to sleep?
And to be laughing, I mean, she was just,
Aw.
she wasn't even speaking anymore, she was just laughing. She was like, oh, it did it again. Right after the clock change.
All right, Nancy, you'll give me a call tomorrow when you
Sure.
can?
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank
everybody.
you.
Please take candy, please feel free.
Oh.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we did the blue bash over at the ballpark,
Oh, yeah.
and that was so cool, I mean, really, really cool, you should have seen Patrick, he's a great dancer in a concert.
Wow, all right, I'm gonna look forward to that.
Kids, but we had some candy left over.
All right,
Thank you very
thank
much.
you,
Thanks
guys.
for the long session. We
Thank
really
you. Thank you very much.
good discussion.
Yeah,
Hi, everybody.
Actually, you probably shut it down because we are done.
Night.
I can do it next time.
Yeah.